My name's Erin Gannon. I'm the Assistant Director of Special Education here at Lancaster. I want to thank you all for being here both in person and virtually for our OPWDD Parent Information Night here. I want to welcome Christy Moscato to join us again for our second night. If you missed last week's presentation, you can access it on our district website. You can go to the Special Education Department tab or the Family Support Center tab, and this will give you more information that kind of go over the basics or OPWD 101 here from Christy with Person-Centered Services. Tonight she's going to dive into more of our frequently asked questions and a little bit more information about OPWD and what Person-Centered Services can do for you and your family. So I want to welcome Christy for being with us. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, thank you, thank you. For those of you who are new, hi, I'm Christy Moscato. I am, whoops. Go back to this slide. I am the Community Relations Manager for Person-Centered Services for our Western region. So I cover the 8 Western counties of New York. We also have, I have a counterpart based out of Rochester who covers the 10 Eastern counties. I work with about 101 different school districts in our region, families, CBOs, community-based organizations, provider agencies, but most importantly, I say the most important letters after my name are MOM. I'm a mom of a now 18-year-old who graduated Hamburg High School in January with her local diploma. She is now working part-time at Tim Hortons and loves food service, and she dances and she volunteers, so we keep her out there and pretty active and pretty busy. College is not for her at this time. If at some point she decides to, she'll be able to go. But right now she's saying, no mas, I am not meant for college. So she got through high school though, so that was the most important thing. So I'm going to just reiterate a couple of the things we talked about. I'll go on this side since no one's on this side tonight, so then I always feel like I'm standing in front of people and I don't like to do that. So at Person-Centered Services, as I mentioned the other night, we provide health home care coordination for more than 18,000 people in the 18-county region we serve. So, we definitely serve a wide range of ages, and, our members are pretty spread out. Our care coordinators live, eat, sleep, and breathe in the communities that they serve. So if somebody is in Genesee County, their care coordinator is going to be in Genesee County. Because they know then the resources that are available there, or the lack of resources that are available there in some of the areas that we serve. Our mission, we connect people to the care, support, and opportunities to maximize their quality of life with a vision where all people lead fulfilling lives, and our core values of people, integrity, and trust. So Erin had put on the flyer and put out there for people to ask questions, to pre-ask questions. So we only had a few that were pre-submitted, so then I threw a couple extra in there, and feel free to raise your hand when we get through these and, ask me any other questions that you might think of. So one of the questions was, what is the difference between an intake specialist and a care coordinator? And there is always a lot of confusion about this. I just had this come up earlier. I spent my morning at the Children's League meeting with staff this morning out in Springville, and they kept saying, well, this care coordinator was in this meeting with us with OPWDD, and when they said her name, I'm like, oh, she's an intake specialist. They're like, what's the difference? And I said, oh my God, somebody else asked that in Lancaster. So an intake specialist, their role is to help the member get OPWDD eligibility. So they are going to be the ones that when we have a full referral packet filled out and completed, we're sending it to the intake department. An intake specialist, will be assigned, and they're the ones that are going to reach out to the family and do that social history. They're going to contact the primary care physician and get the physical. They're going to contact the district and get the documentation we need. They're going to contact whoever gave the diagnoses for the child and get all that documentation. And they're going to make sure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, so we can submit a completed eligibility packet to OPWDD. They are not going to onesie-twosie documents in. They're not going to get the physical and send that in, and then get the IEP and send that in. They wait till they have everything, and that's per OPWDD's requirements. So they can keep everything straight. We're submitting a completed packet when we submit that packet. Once eligibility is obtained in OPWDD, you get that letter that I tell families, because I was told this way back when with my daughter, laminate it and make about 100 copies because you're going to need that letter for the rest of your child's life. Don't lose this letter. So we have one in our fireproof safe. I do have a copy laminated. I have it in the cloud. I have them everywhere. Once that eligibility comes through, that intake specialist and Medicaid is obtained. So I think we talked about this the other day. Care coordination is 100% Medicaid funded. That is how that program is funded. So whether you're in a medical health home, which is where you have to have 2 or more diagnoses, you have to have Medicaid to enter a medical health home, because again, their care coordinators are Medicaid funded as well. We are considered a health home as well, but we're a health home specifically for people with intellectual and or developmental disabilities. So they need to have Medicaid. So our intake specialist, if the child does not, or the person does not have Medicaid, our intake specialist will help the family begin the process of applying for Medicaid. Once that Medicaid comes through, then the person can be enrolled into our health home and start receiving health home care coordination services. So typically what happens is, so if somebody obtained Medicaid today, it's April 1st, they would be enrolled in the health home, the care coordination program as of May 1st. So it's always the first of the month following when Medicaid is obtained. So then that care coordinator is going to work with that person for as long as they're in that role, meeting monthly. And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between basic care coordination and comprehensive care coordination in a little bit. But it's doing those monthly check-ins, and you decide with your care coordinator when you're meeting with them how you want that monthly check-in to be. With us, it's typically an email I'll get. Do you need anything? If I want a meeting, I will request a meeting. And a lot of times it's done on Teams nowadays, but twice a year she comes in person. If I wanted it in person every few months, we could meet somewhere, but she has to have eyes on, right? We all know they have to have eyes on our child. They have to have eyes on our loved one at least twice a year. So it's always challenging when you have kids who start to get a little older and might be a little more active and a little more involved in, programs and sports and maybe the musical at school, or they have a job. It gets a little bit trickier. We had to reschedule our last life plan meeting 3 times because of my daughter's schedule, and we don't know her schedule for Sunday until Friday. And then we know what her schedule is 2 days later. Unfortunately, that's how they do it. I'm not thrilled about that because it makes scheduling very difficult, especially since she opened her availability way up. But we were able to make it work. So when we meet, and we do our life plan meeting every 6 months, I allow, because we do self-directed services, so I allow her fiscal intermediary agency and her broker to be virtual, but the care coordinator always comes in person. So that care coordinator is the one linking to supports and services, finding programs. When I say I really want her to work on this, and her ComHab staff doesn't have the capacity to teach her this, or this is a program I saw that I'd like to get Zoe into, the care coordinator is going to be the one to get me that contact information so I can then do my part and contact the program, see what the wait list is, see what the criteria is it a fit for my daughter, ask those kinds of questions. So that's the big difference between intake and care coordination. Intake does not drop the ball. They do not stop working with a family until everything is in place and we're enrolling them into care coordination. Unless a family says, I have OPWDD eligibility. I was denied the waiver 3 times now, the parental deeming waiver, which we talked a little bit about the other day. I will talk a little bit more about it tonight. I'll kind of reiterate what we said, because based on especially the meeting that I had with the Children's League and how challenging it is for families, especially families of younger kids, to obtain a home and community-based service waiver for that with that parental deeming, meaning the parent's income and assets are waived. Years ago, it was basically checking a box to get the waiver. I can tell you that because we needed the waiver for my daughter, and I didn't have to think twice about it. Now, families are writing 2 and 3 and 4 justification letters to keep getting denied and continuously trying with OPWDD. Things have just changed. It's different times. It's different times. It's different times with the state. It's different times with our budget. So fiscally, it's definitely a different time. The statewide budget. So there's a lot of changes that are happening. But intake is really amazing. These girls and guys are amazing at writing justifications, which often get denied as well. But parental deeming waiver is such a big issue. One of our intake staff who's really passionate about it is writing up kind of an FAQ on parental deeming for us. She's now passing it off to a partner in crime in intake because she's about to give birth any day now. And she emailed me today. I'm like, Jordan, aren't you out? Like, you're due. Like, today was her due date. So she's working on it because it's a huge issue, especially with the younger kids. So Springville Children's League said they are only even referring families with kids with significant needs for OPWDD if the kids need Medicaid, because it's really challenging. Even kids with the most complex needs are being denied the waiver. So it's a work in progress. I have a lot of notes from my meeting with them today that I will be taking to a meeting with higher ups at OPWDD next week, because I had to keep picking my jaw up off the floor when I was there, things that they were informing me about that I had not heard. And I don't know if they heard wrong. I don't know. I have to get to the bottom of it because I'm shocked by some of the things that I heard. But we're working on it. We're all in this together, and we're all going to keep working on it. So this was a really good question, and I took this question off of another training we did. And it came from a district person out in Cattaraugus County, a district staff person. And it was, if a person has a care coordinator, does that mean that they have OPWDD eligibility? Because families may come to school and the school's going to say, do you work with a care coordinator? And they're going to say, yes, I do. That doesn't necessarily mean it's an OPWDD care coordinator. A lot of different entities out there use care coordinator as a title for staff. So even like in the general health homes, they're care coordinators, or you may hear care manager. So most of the other CCOs call their care coordinators care managers. Same position when it is an OPWDD care coordination organization. It's the same position, same responsibilities, same T's to cross and I's to dot for the state, for the Department of Health and OPWDD, which we are governed by both. So we have a lot of paperwork and that needs to be done. So not necessarily. It really boils down to, do they have OPWDD eligibility? Do they work with a care coordination organization? In this region, it's us. 80% of the time, 80 plus, like 82% of the people in our region are served by us. Then the other 18% are served by the other game in town, which is called Prime Care. There's 7 care coordination organizations across the state. There's 2 of us in this region. So, not necessarily. So it's asking a few more questions, because they may think, or they may say, I don't know, somebody comes to my house once a month, or there's people coming into my house so many times, there's so many people that work with my child, I don't know who's who. And that's very common as well, because parents are treading water, right? They're trying to just keep their heads above water half the time. So is care coordinator eligibility and OPWDD eligibility the same? Again, it depends if they're applying for OPWDD eligibility and they then get OPWDD eligibility and they have a care coordinator, that would be the same. But somebody said that they were told their child needed to apply for care coordinator eligibility. And in this instance, I think it is OPWDD eligibility they're talking about. They're going through the process. So that's kind of a little bit of a difference there. This is a hot topic, especially when you're talking about young adults with developmental disabilities. Where can a family go to access sex education for their young adult child? And I think it's for us as well. I think it's for the parents as well. Children with disabilities are 7 times more apt to be sexually abused at some point in their life. A lot of times that is because of lack of comprehension. It could be lack of education that the child has received. A lot of parents, and this is a very personal topic for me. I'm not going to go into details about something that happened a few years ago, but it's very personal to me. And I think of my daughter who's desperate to fit in, desperate to have friends, will say yes to just about anything asked of her. So this is when we want to put the bubble wrap around our kids and keep them close to the vest, right? Keep them with us at all times. And it's not just girls, it's young boys as well. And they are a lot of times more apt to be abused by somebody that they know. And I always go back to when we're talking about education, and education at a level that our kids can understand, but also age-appropriate levels. So there's a fine balance there. You want to teach them age-appropriate, typical age-appropriate life lessons that we're going to teach all our kids, right, about internet safety. And in the days of the internet, and I know I sound like an old lady when I say this, my kids are like, oh my God, Mom. And I am like, look, I have to ask my son how to use Snapchat so I can monitor, because my daughter has one thing and I have her account on my phone so I can see everything that she does, because she's 18 now, so I had to release the reins a little bit. She had nothing for a couple of years, but because she's like, I'm 18, I can do what I want. And I'm like, well, not while you're living in this house, you can't, because you're living with me and I'm responsible for you, and you can have it, but I need it. But I had to have my son teach me at first. And I'm like, she did something. How did she do this? And she has no idea what she did. And, and then he walked us through how to fix what she did. But there's a really good Law and Order episode, and I'm a Law and Order, like I'm a true crime junkie, like totally, but I love SVU, Law and Order SVU. There's a really good episode, and I think it's called Consent. And it's about a 16-year-old girl with Down syndrome who gets pregnant. And Mom thinks it is the boyfriend. She has this boyfriend at her dayhab. She goes to dehabilitation, and Mom thinks it's this boy that's her boyfriend. And, these two hold hands. Like, that's the extent of it. The dayhab offered sex education. Most of the young adults who went there took the class. This young girl's mom thought, she doesn't need to know anything about sex education. She's never going to have sex. She's never going to get married. She's never going to be in a relationship. That's not true, right? All humans want to be loved, want to be touched, want to be in a relationship, want that feeling. Kids with disabilities are no different than that. And in this episode, it turned out that this young girl was being raped by her boss, who told her it was exercise, at a store she worked at, a grocery store, like a bodega, because it's New York City, and she didn't know anything was wrong with it. That was the lack of education, because her mother didn't feel she could understand or should know or needed to know. I had a mom come to a sex education class I used to teach at Parent Network years ago and say, I never thought my son thought anything or knew anything about the changes in his body or really understood. And then she found out he was 12 years old, that he had asked his aunt what sex was, because he had heard it. Right? Kids are going to hear this stuff. They're going to hear it. My daughter was in 7th grade, had a young boy in her 15-to-1 math class who asked her to have sex. Now, luckily I didn't freak out, because I very well could have, but I knew the type of class setting it was. I assumed he had disabilities, and that was the case, and he didn't know what he was saying. He heard something from his older brother. So he didn't really know anything. But these are things in terms our kids are going to hear, so that education is really huge. So Parent Network does have some resources on their website, Parent Network of Western New York. If you Google them, it'll come up. It's parentnetworkwny.org is their website. But there's also, because I was thinking, who's teaching this kind of stuff nowadays? There's a company called Elevatus. Catherine McLaughlin is a sexual educator. She's an expert in the area. She was the keynote speaker at Developmental Disabilities Day at the Niagara Falls Conference Center. She was the keynote last year. That's a great day, and we can talk about that afterwards. That I want to say it's May 21st, but I'll look it up for you before we leave. I'm pretty sure it's May 21st. It happens at the Niagara Falls Conference Center. 20th this year? It was the 21st last year then. So it's the 20th. It's a great event for teachers. If you work in the district and you have kids in high school that are transition aged, 14 and up, and you want to take them on a day trip, it's a great day trip. They leave with all kinds of free swag, a bag full of goodies, because everybody's got tchotchkes out. All the providers in the region are there, giving stuff away and educating about programs. Plus there's workshops and different stuff happening during the day. There's a luncheon. So take a look at it. ddday.org is the website, and you can register online there and go there. But Catherine was there last year. So when I searched it up after seeing this question, there's something called, it's the CIPR, it's the Center for Parent Information Technology. It's a parent resource center. So it's ParentCenterHub.org is the website. If you were to search up sex education for individuals with IDD, this is going to be one of the first things that pops up. There's a lot of great resources on there. I have some great social stories that I am happy to share with anybody who needs them. I even have something as simple as how to use a social story for how to use a urinal, right? That was something I never would have thought of, but when I was teaching this class years ago, I had a parent bring it up, and we found a social story on it, because, right, how does a young boy who's potty training know you don't walk into Wegmans and drop your drawers to the floor, right? Because that's what young boys do when they're potty training at home. Their pants are coming off or going down to the floor, but you don't do that in a grocery store or in a public restroom, and you don't stare at the person next to you. There's urinal etiquette, but it's much more important for our kids with disabilities because we have to educate them as much as possible if they're ever going to be in a bathroom by themselves. That's why I love that almost everywhere has the family restrooms now, because when my husband would take my daughter out, or I would have my son out, they could still go in and have their privacy, and you're right there outside the door and you know no one else is in there with them. SANI's is another organization. It's Self-Advocates of New York State. I know they went through Elevatus several years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, did a training where it was teaching a professional and an individual with disabilities, a young adult with disabilities, to teach sex education for people with disabilities. I was looking on their website to see if they're actively doing the trainings. And so more to come on that, because I am in a meeting with the person who I know went through the training with Mike Rogers. It was Sophia and Mike, went through the training together. I would like to find out if they're still doing this training, because I think it's huge. I think it's so important. I've still taught sexuality, but it's really about, for the younger kids, about preparing our kids for puberty and the changes that are going to happen in their body, and tips that I learned, having a young girl, having her practice wearing a bra, before she needed it. Started with a tankini bathing suit top, then went to like a little bit shorter of a bikini top, had her wear it all day to get used to wearing something. She had to practice with pads. We got the nurse involved when, menstruation did start, to bring her down to make her change her pad, because she would go all day and forget about it, which is very typical for our kids with disabilities. So there are resources out there. It's just a matter of finding them. But I know the Parent Center Hub has some great resources. There's also understood.org is a great, if you have never gone to understood.org, you can go to understood.org and you can put something in the search bar, and if they have videos or printable material or whatever related to it, it's all going to come up, and it's going to tell you if it's a printable something or if it's a video. Information is going to come up. There's like even communication checklists, for your CSE meeting. There's the difference between a 504 and an IEP. There's stuff on sexuality. There's all kinds of things. And then years ago, I used to use, and I was blocked from this website at work, but we are very hyper sensitive to security because we can have PHI on our computers, so protected health information. So there's a lot of sites we can't go to. Actually, our director of IT is the varsity baseball coach here at Lancaster, and I'll be like, Jim, come on, I need to get to this website. But it was called Able to Learn. Able, the number 2, and then the word learn. Lots of great social stories on there. Some are just pictures, some are pictures and words. They can be downloaded and printed. Lots of great, that's where I got the social story about the urinal. I know I had a parent ask me once, my kid loves to be naked. I cannot get them to keep clothes on, so there was a social story on being naked, for a child with lower cognitive functioning. So there's a lot of great information, and again, you can search what you're looking for on that site. So there was a lot of great resources on there. I do have files. I went through a training years ago at Buff State all about sexual education and different resources. So I have a lot of resources that you will all have my contact information at the end of this. If you're looking for something specific, let me know. I'll look through my archives and see what I have, and I'm happy to share. What I have is not near and dear to my heart. I want to share it with anybody who needs it. It's whoever needs this stuff, because we're all in this together. Whether you're a teacher, a parent, or both, we're all in this together. It really does take a village, as cheesy as that sounds. My son always tells me I'm dating myself when I say that, but that's okay. So another question, if an individual over age 18 has permanent residence in Erie County with their parents, but during the academic year attends a college and lives in a dorm in New York State, but not in one of our 18 counties, can they still be served by person-centered services? So I thought I knew the answer, but I wanted to make sure. So I reached out to an AVP of care coordination for us. She said they have accommodated this. And this is when I was telling you I'm going to talk the difference between comprehensive case management and basic case management. They would, if a person has the comprehensive case management, and this is going to be someone who's going to be gone during the academic year and not in one of our 18 counties, we would move them to the basic plan. So the basic support is they're still going to have the life plan and review it biannually, so twice a year, and they're going to continue to monitor health and safety, but all those other check marks that aren't on the right side wouldn't happen during that time. So they're still going to have the same care coordinator. They're still going to have their health and safety monitored, because nothing is more important than the health and safety of our loved ones. And they're going to do that 2 life plan meetings a year. And they'll figure it out for when the student is home. That is still going to happen, but the coordinating the access to behavioral health, to medical and dental, identifying the community-based resources, using the technology to link their services, connecting with the providers, navigating all the systems, I think the anticipate future needs is still, that should be a check too, because we're always anticipating future needs, because our kids aren't going to stay babies forever. They do grow up, unfortunately. I'm learning that the hard way with 2 18-year-olds at home. That would be the difference, and that is something that could absolutely be discussed. So if this is something that you anticipate happening, letting your care coordinator know as soon as possible is key. Let the care coordinator know, Johnny's looking at colleges, they're looking all over New York State, they're going to stay in state, but it may not be in one of the 18 counties you serve. I just want you to know, and they can tell them I said this, because I learned from one of the 2 AVPs of care coordination, is the one who gave me this answer. So that would be an option if that's the case. So is it correct that income level of the individual or their family does not count against them for home and community-based services waiver? So that HCBS waiver, we were talking about it a little bit in the beginning. So I threw this slide back up here to talk about this a little bit more. So that parental deeming waiver is just that. It waives the parent's income and assets. That's what it does. And like I said, years ago, it was a no-brainer. They were handing those waivers out loosey-goosey, left and right. Now, it's a little bit more complicated. Families have to prove need. So the life plan or the provisional life plan or their justification letters have to show that they have exhausted their natural supports. Why can't grandma take care of Johnny, who's bigger than grandma now and is an eloper and is stronger than grandma? Why can't 90-year-old grandma take care of him? Right? It has to be justified to OPWDD. They're assuming they're getting their services through those areas. Obviously, we know their school needs are being met. They're in school. They have an IEP. They have the appropriate accommodations and modifications, or they have a 504 plan with appropriate modifications and accommodations on it. So their needs are being met in school. They're hopefully in the least restrictive environment. They're thriving. They're learning. They're doing well in school. So they're going to look at those natural supports. They're going to look at community supports. And they're going to look at family support services. So I mentioned the family support services document the other day. That is like a 14-page document, and I can share it, but it's also, if you search OPWDD's website, the most current one is on there. Those are programs that are contracted with family support services through OPWDD, which, remember the other day I said family support services is like a branch of OPWDD, that they contract with all these different agencies to provide specific programming. Everything from respite, to behavior, to recreation, to OPWDD eligibility, to education and outreach, to family education and training to family reimbursement is a big one. Although family reimbursement is getting more and more challenging to access as well, from what, especially some of the shocking things I learned today, things that were denied, that I'm having my come to Jesus moment with OPWDD about next week, because I was shocked some of the things that this family was told. But a family has to prove the need. So they have to, if in-home behavior is something that they feel they need to look at the Family Support Services Guide, see who offers in-home behavior in their area, contact those programs, find out the criteria, find out if their child would be a fit, and then hear what the wait list is, because I can assure you there is a wait list. Move on to the next one and take notes of all these things so that they can justify it. Now, they also have to have goals that also justify the need. So they're going to want to see that in their life plan that they have a goal around the behavior that they're experiencing at home, because they have to tie everything together. That Johnny needs in-home behavior because these are his behaviors at home. We cannot control them anymore. There is nobody around to help them with this behavior. None of us are qualified to do it. It's not working. Everything we're trying is not working. This is why he needs this behavior, because of A, B, and C. Or why he needs this service, because of A, B, and C. That has to be done for any of the HCBS waiver services. So to meet reasonable indication of need for the waiver, they need to have at least one waiver service, which the next slide gets into the waiver services a little bit more, as documented in their life plan, that it's a need, and require that the service be delivered at least monthly, or bare minimum require monthly monitoring if it's less than monthly. And you notice it says as documented. This slide came from OPWDD. So what are those services? So we talked a little bit about self-direction with that budget authority. So self-direction, for those of you who might have missed it the other night, or to just kind of recap, that is a service, so you could request from your care coordinator, tell them that you're interested in applying for self-directed services. They are going to put into choices, which is OPWDD system, the request to apply for self-directed services. Does anyone here do self-direction? You're going to then have to attend a self-directed information session. So they no longer require that front door information session for people new to the system, but if you're going through self-direction, you have to attend a self-direction information session. It's done online now, it's done virtually, which makes it a little bit easier, but it really does help you learn more about the program. At least I found it comforting. Between that and the In the Driver's Seat website that I mentioned the other night, that's another great website to learn more about self-direction in a parent-friendly way, understand what all the terminology means, what's a broker, what's an FI, what's IDGS, what's an IDT, it's going to answer like all these acronyms, because right in the special ed world, we talk in alphabet soup all the time, and it's very overwhelming when you're a parent. And I worked in the field and still was very hesitant about self-direction, and my care coordinator for 3 years, every year. So you ready to talk about self-direction? I'm like, nope, not there yet. Nope, not there yet. When my daughter was 12, she finally was like, look, I think you really need to consider it now. With her at the age she's at, when she hits 14, I'd like her to have self-direction, because then we can start really working on the life skills and the skills for independence a little bit more with staff, that I decide on the staff. As long as they don't live in my home, I can hire anybody that I want to work with my daughter. I send an email to my fiscal intermediary agency, say this is the rate of pay, that you decide with your self-directed team what the rate of pay is going to be, how many hours you have allowed in your budget, based on what the priority needs are for my daughter. We put a lot of money into community habilitation, because my daughter, our hope is she will live independent someday, but with a lot of supports in place. She will never be fully independent. My son's going to move out in the fall and go to college, and he'll probably never live at home again, like full-time. He's going to go to college, and then he's going to move south. I know, I already know that. My daughter will always be close to home, But she wants her independence, and I want her to have her independence, which is why I said I've had to release the reins a little bit now that she's 18. She's getting her first tattoo Saturday night. She's 18. I said she pulled at the heartstrings. She's getting the adoption symbol. She's adopted. She goes, I want to get the adoption symbol on my wrist. I'm like, how do you say no to that? And she's 18, and it's literally a triangle and a heart. That's all it is. So I said, I'll see if you can handle the pain of just that triangle and that heart, because you hate needles. Remember that. So she's that adult. We want to work on those independent skills. So my niece is one of our ComHab staff, she's a teacher in Buffalo. She's a substitute teacher for special needs kids. And she has the patience of a saint, and she's 22 years my junior. So, she's 12 compared to my old age that my daughter thinks I am. Like Jordan's cool and hip, a cool 30-something-year-old cousin. But she really has pushed her out of her comfort zone, and it's been a godsend for us, especially when, like, her last couple years in high school, the summer months, right? My daughter didn't go to summer programming, so that's a great way to use some of those ComHab hours and to get them out of the house and not sitting on their phones all day or laying in bed all day, is have them out with a staff for 8 hours a day, a few days a week, and that's what we did. My niece traveled with us when we went away on baseball trips to take my daughter. That's when they worked on her resume. They went to the Cleveland Zoo, and then while they were sitting there having lunch, my niece pulled out her iPad that she had in her backpack, and they worked on creating a resume for my daughter. Then they started working on interviewing skills, and that making eye contact and socializing and being able to comfortably explain her disability to a prospective employer. Because she learned the hard way that not disclosing your disability is not always a good thing when you have invisible disabilities when it comes to a job, because the expectations are different. And a new store manager had come into where she was working, and it was just a whole nightmare. So now she disclosed her disability at the interview. She was hired on the spot at Tim Hortons. She just said, I take a lot longer to learn things, but when I learn it, I got it, but I really need a checklist for my daily tasks. So they created that for her and laminated it, and it's got Zoe's name at the top, and that is Zoe's checklist that she uses for her closing duties, which is huge. And she loves her job. She's a reliable employee. She worked an 8-hour shift today because someone else called in. So our kids are the best employees. I think they're the most reliable employees out there. So self-direction is that having the ability to self-hire community rehabilitation staff or respite staff. And if there's a neighbor that is really good with your child and your child really loves them and you trust them, they could be hired as a respite provider to give you a break. With self-direction, community classes, like my daughter's dance is prepaid for the year, out of her budget. When we travel, her airfare is reimbursed. Our mileage to and from her dance 3 nights a week, and it's an 18-mile round trip thing, that's reimbursed monthly. So there's a lot of things in there, but for me, with my child, the ComHab, the community hab, was the biggest thing. My daughter's hairdresser is on there to teach her how to do black girl hair. I said, that's a life skill, that's a job, that you can do, and she is teaching her how to braid, and how to, do those like really tight little micro braids. Because Zoe wants to learn it, and why not get paid, have Carla get paid to do it. So another service is agency-supported community rehabilitation. And we have 12 and up on here for the community rehabilitation. I have seen younger kids get approved depending on the situation. Typically, on average, it's 12 and up. That means they're going to go to an agency, they're going to go to a site, and they're going to socialize, and they're going to be working on skills, working on maybe some job skills, working on social skills. They might go out to the mall and, do a little shopping or go grocery shopping or go bowling or go to the movies and then go back and, work on some skills. So that's community rehabilitation. Then there's respite. Now, if a family is requesting respite through HCBS waiver, so it's either going to be through the self-direction, the self-hire respite, or they're going to need 2 of the 3, in-home, recreation, and site-based respite. So they're going to have to justify a need for 2 of those 3 in order to be approved possibly for home and community-based services waiver. I tell families, just from experience, you don't want just respite. Chances are you will definitely get denied if all you're looking for is respite. You'll be denied the waiver. There's a really good probability of that. So let's think of what else our child needs. Is it assistive technology? Do they have a communication device that the school provides. But then the school keeps it at the end of the day and on the weekends and on breaks. They're not going to let it go home 9 times out of 10. I've seen it happen occasionally. So does your child want to communicate when they're home? Do you want your child to communicate when you're home? Absolutely. So that could be something that could be requested. Environmental or vehicle modifications. So environmental mod, do they need special alarms put on the door, special locks put on the door? Do they need the tub changed to one of the open door tubs because you can no longer lift them because they've gotten so big over that side of that tub, or they can't get in on themselves because they can't lift their leg that high because of their disability, so you need that open-sided, whatever it's called, that open-sided tub. Do they need bars and safety bars installed, things like that? Do they need for their vehicle a hitch put on, or are they an adult who doesn't have use of their right leg and they want to drive? So they need hand controls put on the vehicle. Things like that. So thinking outside the box, for environmental mods or vehicle modifications. Family education and training, FET. Years ago, and I'm talking 13, 14 years ago, if a family just wanted FET as their only waiver service, that was okay. I can tell you the first 4 years we had services, that's all we did, was a family education and training course with People Inc., because they were really the only ones still doing FET around here. So I took a guardianship class, I think I took a bullying class, and we did one other self-direction. I did a one-on-one self-direction session with the person who's now my broker. She runs the FI program at People Inc. So, those are the types of things. So now you can have that, but you need to have something else too. They're not going to say just having an FET once a year is enough. Then there's those transition/adult services. So remember I said the other night, transition starts at age 14. That's what we think of as transition age, because we're starting to think about life after high school, because you'll blink and it'll be here. Believe you me. For anyone who's experienced it, that was my experience. I blinked. They were kindergartners and then they were seniors. So, we are thinking about that dehabilitation. So if the person, the young adult, is not college bound, they're not exiting with a diploma, they are not ready to go to work. Maybe they never will be, but maybe they will be. But right now, we don't want them sitting at home all day doing nothing. Our goal is for our loved ones to be an active part of their community and giving back to their community and participating in their community. That's what dehabilitation can help with. That's social. The social piece is so huge for our kids and for our young adults. There's pathways to employment, there's pre-vocational services, there's residential services, there's supported employment. So yes, we can get the supported employment through Access VR, but then we can also get it through OPWDD. So my daughter has both right now, but she has OPWDD and Access VR, but through Access VR, we're right now working on job sustainability, and then we'll be working on job retention, because we've had one issue with one employee. That's why it's a sustainability. So her VR counselor is a fly on the wall at Tim Hortons now, once a week, just eavesdropping on kind of what's happening. Because they know me. They know who I am. So it can't be me. So she does it, and then it's going to say, okay, this is what I heard, this is what's happening, Zoe was corrected because of this, or Zoe was a rock star with this, whatever. This person, I see what you mean, she was not very friendly to your daughter, because there's always that one person, right, who's not nice to anybody. So it's not just my daughter, it's anybody. So she's doing that. Once we get to the retention phase, then, since Zoe's out of high school, we will transition her to OPWDD's supported employment. Because you can't have both supported employment through OPWDD and supported employment through Access VR at the exact same time. But you can have both services, just providing different services, if that makes sense. So that's the waiver in a nutshell. Now, I mentioned the budget authority, so what does it mean? It just means that you have budget authority. You have a broker that you work with, and you are going to handle the budget for your child. It can also, when they're an adult, like when my daughter goes off and lives on her own, we can have money in the budget that is going to pay for somebody to help make sure her budget is correct and that she has everything that she needs, and kind of to oversee, to do the invoicing, to upload the invoices that we need to do. Like with her mileage, I have a spreadsheet that I just modify the dates each month. I make sure the total's there. I just upload once a month for her mileage reimbursement, because I am not going to do it weekly. I don't have the time to do it weekly. But doing it monthly, it's pretty doable. I have a spreadsheet, I change it, I PDF it, I upload it. Some families might need assistance learning how to do that. Some families might need somebody to do it consistently for the person, and they can look at hiring somebody to help with that. But it's, self-directed services can be a game changer, but it is not for everybody. I told you I worked in the field and was afraid of it for a few years because I was worried about the work that was involved. Now, I will meet with families with my parent hat on about self-directed services. I will show them the database we use, and I'll say, see all this stuff over here? It's like the guy in The Wizard of Oz. Don't pay any attention to what's behind this curtain. You don't need to know this right now. Focus on what you need to know. You need to know how to submit invoices for reimbursement. You need to know how to verify your staff's time and what they're, putting in for, and making sure. I've noticed when, my daughter's hairdresser, who's family, she's a friend of ours now, but was not putting in her time. I'm like, Carla, you need to get paid for the hours you're spending, the time you're spending with her. She goes, I hate getting paid to work with my baby girl. And I'm like, we want you to get paid for, you're helping her, you're teaching her life lessons, but you can verify all of that and make sure all of that's in there. You also need to know how to look up your budget. How much do you have left in each area? How many ComHab hours do you have left? Because you pick how many, we figured we wanted 520 hours a year, so divide that up by, 52 weeks, it's 10 hours a week my daughter gets. They don't all have to be, she has never, except in the summer, taken 10 hours a week, every single week. Because when she was in school and working and dancing, you're never gonna have an extra spare 10 hours, but in the summer, that's where that 3 8-hour days came into handy, because she could get 24 hours banged out in a week in the summer. So, but it's all a learning process. Self-direction is for a lot of people. It is not for everybody. There was also a time with OPWDD that agencies could not take on any new families. So families have been on wait lists for fiscal intermediary agencies, and that fiscal intermediary agency is the HR company for the person. So for us, it's Heritage Christian. They are our HR, so our staff is hired and trained by them. Heritage does the background check, does the fingerprinting, does all of that. They're paid whatever rate we decided on when we created the budget, and whatever rate I talked to this person about. They're paid for their training. Heritage pays for all of that. And then when I need to get reimbursed and I submit the mileage, I get a check from Heritage. So Heritage doles out the funds. So I say my daughter has a budget, but it's not like it's money being deposited into our account. People are like, what do you mean? I have to have that much money? Absolutely not. It's not money we are ever going to see unless we are submitting for reimbursement for something. There's a lot of confusion with that. People are like, but what do you mean? Somebody was telling me somebody today had this astronomical budget and they use $4,000 a year, but they're also, I think because there's wait lists for so many programs out there, that holds up people getting enrolled in these programs. Or they're trying to find staff, which is a big difference. And one question I meant to add right after this slide, and I didn't, was how do I find staff? It's not easy if you have no family or friends, you're new to the area. It is not easy. I know some people have gotten lucky on OPWDD has a self-direction Facebook page. They have a OPWDD Region 1 Family Support Services page, and then there's also a self-direction for Region 1 page. I have seen people who have put in a general, I live in this town, my child is this age, not giving real specifics about anything. These are the hours I'm looking for. These are my child's needs. Private message me if you work for, and Heritage or People Inc. or whoever is my fiscal intermediary agency. Sometimes you may have staff that is already approved to work for that agency, and might be wanting to pick up a few more hours and has exactly what you need. That in the driverseat.org website has great interview questions to ask people. when you're looking to hire staff that could be a stranger. Word of mouth is another big way. And in the driver's seat, they also have on there, and I'm pretty sure they still have it on there. I think they did a month ago when I looked, almost like a Match.com, where you put in what your needs are, what town you live in, what hours you're looking for, and then workers, ComHab workers or respite workers can go in and do the same and see if you match. I've heard of 2 people in the last probably 8 years that I knew had success with that who told me they used that. I had a lot of people who found success on the Facebook pages, either the Region 1 Family Support Services or the Region 1 Self-Direction, because there's a lot of other parents on there. Now I tell parents, when you are joining a group like that or on a group like that, take everything you hear with a grain of salt, because nobody is the be-all and know-all, and they don't know your child or your needs or your family. So somebody, right, you've all heard that adage that if you have a positive experience, you might tell 10 people, but if you have a negative one, you're going to tell 100. That's what can happen. You can go down a rabbit hole really quickly on some of these groups. So just be careful. I just cautionary tale, just be careful. But people have had luck finding people. Oh, hey, I didn't know you did self-direction. I did do self-direction. I love that Lancaster is starting a SEPSA. Yay. SEPTA, yay, shout out. But that'll be another great place for information sharing and for people. We're going to all learn from each other, right? Everybody, you're going to learn from all your neighbors and from other people who have these services. Because as parents, we don't know what we don't know if we don't know about it. And none of us are the expert in any one area. I never claim, people say, will say, oh, this is the expert. I am not an expert. I'm a parent who has learned this all out of necessity. Is the bottom line. I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm gonna, go to work for Parent Network, where I worked for 10 years before. It was because of my daughter. That's why I did it, because I wanted to be the best advocate I could be for her, and that comes from me being knowledgeable and learning all I can learn and being a sponge and talking and learning from other families. I learned so much from other families. Can I apply for Medicaid before OPWDD intake process starts? Absolutely. Absolutely, especially if it's Medicaid based on income. A lot of our families come to us with Medicaid already, based on income level. Some families, you can be going through the intake process knowing you're going to have to apply for Medicaid at some point, and you can be doing it simultaneously. But if we're going off of the child's disability, having OPWDD eligibility can help with that. Doesn't always, but it can help. But it can be done simultaneously. You can be going down both roads at the same time. And for anybody who's ever seen a Medicaid application, it's lengthy and the process is a nightmare. And I mentioned last week that Medicaid, at least in Erie County, is so behind, like in recertifications. When you have Medicaid, you have to recertify your child's Medicaid every single year. I was told by my care coordinator that Zoe was on her list for her recert happening February of 2025. It was the second week in February. I hadn't heard, I had received nothing in the mail. And then I'm like, hey, you know what? We submitted a recert last January, and I never heard from Medicaid. I never got the approval letter that she was recertified for another year. So I called Medicaid, because I didn't want her to lose her Medicaid, because A, we're going to lose care coordination, is the most important thing. We're going to lose this. When I finally got a hold of Medicaid, he goes, oh, yep, January 24th of 2024, you dropped off her recert, and we haven't gotten to it yet. We're 18 months behind. Somebody told me last week that they were told 2 years behind now. So they were told 2 years by somebody. I was told 18 months by a different person at Medicaid. So he said, don't worry, everything's status quo. We haven't even thought about sending your recert out because we haven't even recertified you for 2024 yet. So things don't move quickly, I guess, is the moral to that story in this state. I think in any state, but as far as Medicaid goes, it moves at a snail's pace. So the sooner you can start the process, probably the better. For some families, we applied for SSI for our daughter in November, had our interview. January, I dropped off all her pay stubs, did all that. That's where it's sat. and I look at the site, we are still in step 2 of 5 of her process. It doesn't move quick, and I know that, and I have to know that working in this field. Yeah.
So if your child gets SSI, as my daughter does,
She has
they
Medicaid.
told me they never have to recertify for Medicaid.
When she has
It
us.
scared me just now. I'm like, I've never.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, and I should have clarified that. Sorry about that, right. Yes. When she has Medicaid as part of her SSI, no, she does not need to recert. You have to do enough with SSI to prove, like, I have Zoe bringing home every pay stub she gets. Like, she'll come home with a stack because she'll forget them for a month. And I'm keeping them all in case she gets approved for SSI. And then I have to submit all pay stubs that she's ever received. But yes, if you have Medicaid, and I apologize for that, based on Social Security, Medicaid goes along with that, you do not need to recert. When you have Medicaid through the waiver, especially with our younger kiddos, you have to recert every year if you do not simultaneously have SSI. So my child is enrolled in a children's medical health home. So like Hoshai Healthy Kids is one, Jewish Family Services has one. They're the two I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Can I still apply for OPWDD? Absolutely. We do a presentation and work with Chunny, is like the statewide health home organization. Every year we do a training with them. And what happens is, a lot of times they're working with the family, they've been working with them for a while, and they're realizing as the child's getting a little bit older, you know what? They can benefit more from the supports and services throughout OPWDD. We want them to apply for OPWDD. So they'll typically contact us. We will work with the family on OPWDD eligibility while they still are in the other health home, and then it's a coordinated transition where March 31st, they're going to stop services with Hoshai Healthy Kids. April 1st, they're going to be enrolled in our health home, so there's continuity of care. There's no lapse in coverage. There's no double dipping of Medicaid. So it's that they'll stop one program one day and start the next program. So that is our intake staff working with the health home case manager for whatever other organization the child's enrolled in, to switch them. And that's the same for an adult health home, because there's children's health homes, and then when they're 18, they transition to an adult health home, so different workers, different everything. They could still transition to an OPWDD one, if and when they choose to. Can you contact me if you think of another question? So you're laying in bed tonight and you're like, oh, I should have asked this. Or next week, something comes to mind. Or a parent, another parent asks you a question. Or you're a teacher and a parent asks you a question. Can you still contact me? Absolutely. Those of you who were here last week, you all have my business card, my actual business card. Those of you who are not, there's all my contact information. I always tell people, quickest way to get a response from me is shoot me a text. Because I travel a lot, I'm in 8 counties, I'm a bit of a traveling roadshow. I will say, hey, can we set a time to meet? If I think I need to be in front of my computer, I will set a phone, we will set a time, an appointment for me to be at my computer. If you're a district employee and you have questions about who a care coordinator is for one of your students, you can contact me. I can look it up. I will verify I have a consent for the district, for this child, for this person. If I have a signed consent on file, I can share that contact information with you. I verify all of that. If they're not in my system, they're not with our organization. Plain and simple. So they could, and that doesn't mean that they have OPWDD eligibility or they don't. That's just they do not have care coordination with person-centered services. A date of birth is typically the best way for me to look somebody up. A lot of times parents, will give you verbal permission. I know you have to have a consent, for the parent. I have had districts to say, hey, the parent told me I can talk to you, but can you verify you have a consent? So I feel better about talking to you. Can you send me their signed consent? Absolutely. I can share that information with you. But if you want to walk through a case with me, if you are a parent and, like I said, you think of that obscure question, if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to stop digging till I find somebody who can help you with that answer. Because again, I am not afraid to say I have absolutely no idea, or I don't know, or this is what I know to be true as of right now. It could be totally different tomorrow, and it oftentimes is with OPWDD or any state-run agency, right? With any entity, stuff changes constantly. We're in a constant evolving systems. The mental health system is the same thing. It's constantly evolving and changing. But any other questions? Yes, Melise. Mm-hmm. Not provisional for permanent eligibility? The front door, the front door. So for the front door phone number, it's basically like OPWDD's intake department is called the front door, which I joke, but it's not always a joke. It's sometimes like a rear locked door for some families because it's not easy getting through the system anymore. They can absolutely contact me, or they can call our general intake, which is like an 866 number. It's on our website. I don't know it off the top of my head, but they can start with me. And if it's a parent that we're pretty confident could possibly qualify and really wants to enroll in health home care coordination, I can meet with the family on the phone, take all the general information. I even find out who their primary care physician is. I pre-fill out the intake packet as much as I can. Then I send it to intake. Intake prints everything, highlights what the family needs to complete, mails it to them in a prepaid envelope for them to just complete the highlighted sections and send it back. Because if you mail a family a blank packet or send home with a kiddo a blank packet, 95% of the time it's not going to be filled out correctly. Something's going to be missing. I just had a one-on-one with someone from St. Mary's School for the Deaf because she sent me a few referrals recently, and then there's back and forth with the family because stuff is missing, stuff is filled out incorrectly. So I asked her, I said, can we please have a 30-minute, and it actually ended up being like 20 minutes, where I walked her through the referral packet. We also have on our YouTube channel, we do a referral process webinar every year. It's a 45-minute lunch and learn. We do it at noon, where if you have some familiarity about OPWDD, we walk professionals through completing that packet. And it's really that pre-completion, because there's a lot less room for error if you are pre-filling out everything you can that you have the information for, highlighting what the family needs to complete before you're sending it home. Because a parent gets that full packet, it is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Parents' eyes are going to glaze over. It's too much information. I will do all I can to alleviate that. I like talking to parents, because like I said, I'm a parent first and foremost, and I am at like kind of the other side of it now. My kid's not little anymore. I blinked, she graduated, we're entering the adult world. I want to help other families get what they need for their kids. I will also, somebody from West Seneca sent me a family recently. They've gone back and forth. They've sent the paperwork home probably 4 times. Mom's never returned it. She said, will you just call and talk to this parent? I think she needs to talk to another parent. That mom's not ready for these services yet. She's not ready. She's still mourning. She's still grieving her child's diagnoses. They just recently got a pretty significant diagnosis. And she's not ready to think, my child's never going to go to college, because the school at a meeting said, and she said something about college, like, oh no, they're never going to be able to go to college. You don't tell the parent of an 8-year-old that. You shouldn't anyways, because right, we're constantly pushing them towards diploma till you can no longer push. Push till you can no longer push, till it's really obvious to everybody that that's just not an option. So let's give them everything they need to be successful and to be an active part of their community. But this parent, and I just saw this person actually at the class at Buff State last night. I said to her, so yeah, that parent, I said, she'll get there in her own time. And she has my contact information. I said, if ever you have a question or you just want to talk, call me. I'm happy to talk to you, because we've all been there, right? We've all been there. We grieve, when the big milestones happen with neighborhood kids or our other kids, and, the big milestones are happening, and we're thinking, I wonder if, Zoe's ever going to get married. I wonder if she's ever going to have kids. I wonder if, that's going to be part of her reality. When she was younger, I didn't know. When she was younger, I thought for sure at 17 I'd be going for legal guardianship. For sure, thought that. Thought for sure she'd be in school till she was 21. Neither one of those things are happening. I'm learning about the supported decision-making process as an alternative to guardianship, because she's, again, going to need a circle of support, right? Our kids need that circle. It takes a village. It really, really does. She's going to need people to help her make big life decisions, but she doesn't need me to make every decision for her. So that's just like a learning process, but I will talk to families whenever, and if I'm not the right family, if they want to talk to somebody with an 8-year-old, I'll find a staff person. I'll find a friend who has a younger one and wants to talk to them. Because, it's hard, and then things are going to be, the kids are going to be doing great, they're on that uphill trajectory, then something happens and they regress. That's going to happen. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. So it's, I have conversations with parents who don't understand that when their child turns 18, they're their own legal guardian. I just met with a mom at Maryvale last week. He's 19. We were waiting for him for this meeting because he's his own legal guardian. And mom is like, well, why does he need to sign? I'm his legal guardian. And I said, have you hired an attorney and stood in front of a judge where a judge has granted you guardianship? Because if not, then you are not his legal guardian. He's his own legal guardian. And it's a confusing thing, right? Because we're just treading, we're that duck swimming on the pond with our legs going a million miles a minute, and we might look calm, but we are not calm. We're pedaling really fast underneath, and it's, you don't think about these things. And I remember being told when my daughter was 5 and got provisional eligibility, put a reminder in your calendar now for her 17th birthday to hire an attorney, start guardianship. We didn't need to go that route, but you never know. So I wasn't ready. Yeah, good thing I didn't, say, oh, she's never going to get a diploma when she was 7, 8 years old. Good thing I didn't, start guardianship paperwork back then. Not that a judge would have granted it with a 7-year-old, but a lot can change, and our kids are going to surprise us in great ways and in not so great ways, whether they're typically developing or they have special needs. It's not going to, parenting is parenting, but it's learning all you can learn, gathering all the information, sharing your knowledge, and working as a team. Let's all find your own support. My 2 best friends are both parents of kids with disabilities who I met through the Parent Network of Western New York. I met them back in 2011 when I went through their parent leadership program, and they are my closest friends because when I'm having a bad day, they understand what my bad day is like because they've been through it. Because you're right, not every day is a good day. We all have bad days. But they get it when I'm like, oh my God, I need to go to dinner. I need to talk to you. Because my husband's a great support. He's learned a lot the last 2 years about this world, but right, it's always typically one parent or the other that is the advocate, that learns all they can learn, that really look at the IEP, that goes through it with a fine-tooth comb. I am that person, I get the IEP, I look at it, and when I see the list of attendees wrong, I'm like, oh, get the highlighter out. And then I reach out to the district. My husband he couldn't read an IEP if his life depended on it. And he was the first one to admit it, but now he's our director of marketing, so he's had to learn a lot about disabilities in the last couple of years, learned a lot of the terminology. And he always says, and it's so true, he said this for years, what about the parents that don't know where to turn, or don't know that they can ask questions, or don't know that they can push back, or don't know that they can ask why when they're told no to something? There's a lot of parents who think, this doctor is the expert, this practice is the expert, this teacher is the expert, but they are the expert on their child. And I never ever want parents to forget that. So if it's comfortable sending them to me, absolutely send them to me. If I'm out, my out of office message, there's always somebody for them to contact if it's a time sensitive manner. Okay, remember, no question is off limits. If you think of it, text me, email me, call me. Our upcoming engagement series, go on our website to register. We're doing how to be an effective advocate, and I really work with families about advocating for their kids in a positive and collaborative way with their doctors or their school district or with anybody. We are doing a supported decision-making August 19th, but I just found out last week he is also doing one April 30th, virtual, and then I'm doing a bullying in youth with special needs in November. Connect with us, we're all over. We put all our stuff up online, stuff to register. Anybody wants to know more about the entire OPWDD process, maybe meet to some OPWDD folks. May 1st at 1021 Broadway, we're doing an OPWDD event. OPWDD runs it, and it kind of is like follow the yellow brick road of the process, where it starts with the front door and eligibility and children's services and waiver services, and then it goes to the CCOs, and then or the eligibility, then the CCOs and other organizations will be there. Share that information with our families. It should have gone up or be going up by the end of the week on all our social media, the flyers for it. We have the flyers in multiple languages, so if you have families that are non-English speaking families and you would like a flyer in a different language, let me know. We do it at that site because OPWDD has a satellite space at 1021 Broadway because their site in West Seneca is not on a bus route and not disability friendly, and it's the DDRO, the Developmental Disabilities Regional Office. So they did a satellite office in the city of Buffalo on a bus line. Literally, if you're facing the Broadway Market, it's across the street on the left. It's a huge medical building. Let me know if you need any more information, you think of questions, please call me, text me, email me, and I'll get back to you. So thank you very much.